This is Rock Talk with Mitch Lafon. Mitch Lafon.
Welcome to another episode of Rock Talk with Mitch Lafon on this Mitch Marathon month, or quite frankly, Mitch Marathon madness. I mean, this is nutty. There are way too many interviews to get done, but we're getting them done. Anyway, today I'm going to dig back into the vaults. So we are going to have one of these interviews that got lost along the way. And this is with producer, mixer Bob Clearmountain. He's, of course, worked on albums by Hall & Oates, Big Bang Boom, Bryan Adams, You Want It, You Got It, Cuts Like a Knife, Wreckless, Into the Fire. He's mixed albums by the Rolling Stones, including Tattoo You, Stripped, Live Licks, what else? He's done Roxy Music, Huey Lewis and the New Sports, David Bowie, Let's Dance, and then a whole bunch of Bruce Springsteen albums, including Born in the USA, Tunnel of Love, Lucky Town, etc., etc., etc. And this interview was done probably, trying to think, either in February or March of 2019. And when there is a guest such as Bob that is not promoting something that has to be right now, like a producer, I will put that in a different pile, sort of like, okay, well, I'll get to it when I get to it, and I'll move up the ones that have sort of timestamps on them, in the sense that we're talking about an album that comes out on Friday, or we're talking about a tour that starts on Monday, or anyway, it got lost in the shuffle. It was a half-hour interview. Now, of course, listening to it, you're probably going to hear some time references back to February or March of 2019. But anyway, I've got it up, and I hope you enjoy this, because, like I said, I'm going to go through the entire closet of interviews that have been lying around, and we're going to get them all out, and you're going to get a chance to hear them. Now, this, of course, was done with the last mic setup that I had, so I don't know how that's going to affect the sound, but anyway. Again, folks, please head over to loudtracks.com/Mitch to see if you want a t-shirt, and let me know at Mitch Lafon on Twitter whether I should make a white shirt with the logo or not. I think a white shirt would be actually kind of cool, quite frankly. And well, there you go. So here, without further ado, as I clean out the closet, we could have these long discussions at the front of every one of them. But I think on some of these, let's just do efficient, quick and easy. So here, without further ado, because there's been a lot of further ado, we've been waiting a long time. Here is producer, mixer, all-around good guy, Bob Clearmountain. We are speaking with engineer, mixer, and producer Bob Clearmountain. He, of course, has had a hand in many of the world's greatest albums, including a lot of the Bon Jovi stuff, Bryan Adams, and more, the Rolling Stones. Bob, an absolute pleasure to have you on today.
Thanks, my pleasure.
Yes. I'm going to start here before we start getting into the history and how did you become an engineer and a producer. On January 26th, I was in Montreal with Bryan Adams. And the local radio station was interviewing him, and they said, boy, talk about waking up the neighbors. You were on there with Mutt Lange and Bob Clearmountain. And he looked at the guy and he said, yes, the A-Team. Right? Talk to me a little bit about your work with Bryan and Mutt, because I was actually talking to Phil Collin this morning of Def Leppard, who bemoaned the fact that he's never worked with you, but he also was extolling the virtues of Mutt. So talk to me about this team of Clearmountain, Lange, and how does a producer and a mixer and all, how do you have to work together to sort of become the A-Team?
Well, that's interesting, because Mutt is, he's quite different than most producers. He's a bit more painstaking and hands-on than most guys, I think. And that's a tough question to answer, because he's a difficult guy to actually work with. Bryan and he are very good friends, and they've obviously done some incredible work together. But Mutt tends to dictate every single little minute thing that happens on a record, including performing his own, doing background vocals himself, because he's an incredible singer, besides being an amazing producer. And and I'm not quite used to that. I mean, I'm used to having a bit more freedom as far as making mix decisions and things like that. So it was a little awkward for me, to be honest. But it worked out fine. I always try to adjust to my style to whoever I'm working with, and which was certainly the case with Mutt. And it was different than my role with Bryan on the 4 albums before that, where I was a co-producer, and so kind of had more of a equal input into it.
Yeah, so let me talk to you about producing first, because you've done sort of everybody from Bryan Adams to you've done stuff with the Stones, you've done stuff with Johnny Holiday, Demi Lovato, and others. Talk to me about how you adjust your style for each. In fact, do you adjust your style for each project, or is it, no, this is Bob, the producer, and this is what I do, and if you want to buy in, we're good? And if do you sit down with each artist individually and talk to them and see a vision, or do you have your way and they just sort of have to buy into it?
Well, obviously, everybody's got a certain style to what they do. Any mixer or producer. But the thing is that I never think of it as my record. I mean, I didn't write the songs. I didn't do the performances. And so I try to get into the artists and producers' heads. And, I do try to, usually, if I can have a conversation with them, it's the best thing, to find out what their motivations are and their direction is, and how they feel the outcome should be, what it should end up. The sound of the record should reflect their vision, not my vision. And so I try to be as chameleon-like as possible, and so that I'm reflecting a reflection of what they want, and try to get the best out of what they want to do, And so any suggestions that they make, even if I disagree, which often I do, I'll say, okay, well, let me see, why do they want that? And I try to understand it. And once I understand it, then okay, I get that. I'll make that work, and that kind of thing.
I do want to ask you about, I know we only have about 20 minutes, so I'm trying to go through this as quickly as possible. Shine a Light, the Rolling Stone film.
Yeah.
Talk to me about the specific challenges of producing and mixing music for a film, because it can't necessarily just reflect on the music. The music has a purpose, an intended purpose in the visual and in the movie telling and in the film telling. Talk to me about that project, and was it just I went in and mixed something, or did you really have to sort of sit with Scorsese and say, okay, how are we going to make this fit the scene?
Well, that's exactly what the second part of what you just said is exactly what it was. I mean, first of all, I was there from the beginning, so I recorded it, and I was in the theater, and so I experienced what the whole thing was. Plus the fact, of course, I've been working with the Stones for forever. But Scorsese was a whole different element, because he had a filmmaker's viewpoint on the whole thing, instead of a music producer or an artist. And so he would edit the film, and then he'd say to me, okay, what's happening audio-wise has to reflect what we're looking at, and very often it would be a specific cut. I mean, and the camera, obviously, there were, I think, 18 or 19 film cameras on the stage, and so that would change quite radically. And so the mix, if you listen to the mix without looking at the picture, it sounds kind of ridiculous, because things just jump out. Because there'll be a full shot of Keith. They'll say, okay, I want to hear Keith now. It's as if the microphones were on the camera, that kind of an effect. And in fact, I got slagged for that in Gear Sluts, I think, on one of these bulletin boards. I said, boy, just what was Clearmountain thinking, doing such a dynamic mix. And but people that actually watched the movie, that were more into the Stones and just watching the movie, I think they got it, that it was like you were the camera, and the mix would change according to what you saw. And it was a whole different way of doing it. I've done so many concert videos. It's probably about half of what I do. And, a lot of times you'll ride the guitar solo up, of course, or something is a featured musical element, but nowhere near as drastically as what Scorsese was calling for.
Yeah, really. Let me quickly talk about the technology. You went from the good old days of splicing 2-inch tape with a razor blade and and cutting and pasting literally to being able to fly stuff in with Pro Tools. Are we sort of in a golden era of music making with the ability to mix and match, or have we gotten to a point where everything is so perfect and so pitch corrected and so auto-tuned that we sort of lost the essence of the song and the essence of the music?
Well, it depends on who's at the controls, really. I think the tools that we have now are fantastic. I wouldn't want to have to go back to cutting 2-inch tape with a razor blade for anything, because it was really the hard work, and you had to be so careful, and it was very hard to, like, if you cut something and it didn't work, to actually put it back. Nowadays, with digitally, it's a huge improvement, but at the same time, it's very easy to get too precise, which is kind of what you were getting at, I think. And I think so many records nowadays, they really are they sound too perfect. They don't sound human anymore. It's so easy to get every little flaw out of a performance. And, the singer sings, one of the choruses pretty good and the other one's not so good. So, let's just repeat that. And, that's so simple to do nowadays that it happens. I think it happens too much, and sometimes you should just let a performance be a performance. And to me, so many records, a lot of modern records are just boring to me, because you can hear that. You can hear where things are repeated and things are so auto-tuned and processed that there's no, the human quality is all filtered out. And I prefer listening to older records. Even though I'm a big digital fan, more so than analog. I don't actually like recording on analog. It always kind of bugged me. Most of my favorite records were all recorded analog and recorded the old way, because it sounded like humans, and that's what's important in music to me, is that human element.
Is that a conversation you'll have with a Bryan Adams or a Bon Jovi or a client, for the lack of a better word, and say, listen, I'll do this album, but we can't make it perfect. We need to, there's a certain beauty in the imperfections, right?
Well, no, I won't have that conversation, because this is just my own opinion.
Okay.
And I'll do whatever the client wants. If they want totally programmed drums and they want everything to be flawless, so hey, they're paying me, right? They're paying me for a service that I'm providing, and if they want to have a conversation about it, fine, I'll tell them how I feel, but it isn't going to keep me from doing whatever it is they want to do. You know what I mean? Because
right.
It just wouldn't be right, and I would probably not be working so much anymore. If I put my foot down and said, well, I'm not mixing that because it sounds too perfect. I don't think that would work.
That would work. Let me look at some of the classic albums that you've had a hand in. Of course, being a Canadian living in Montreal, Bryan Adams' Wreckless, 1985, absolute masterpiece. Talk to me about, really, and I had a nice conversation with Jim Valance about a month ago about it. Talk to me about that album, because here he is coming off of Cuts Like a Knife, where the success was starting to rise. We had You Want It, You Got It, where was this sort of the make and break album for Bryan, and what was it like going into the studio? Was there a sense of pressure, or was this a sense of, hey, it's just another album and whatever is whatever?
Well, it was somewhere in the middle between those two things, because there was a bit of pressure, because we wanted it. We had some success with the album before, and but the thing is that he'd written some really great songs, and so I didn't think there was much question that it would be successful, that it would do well. I really believed in him a lot. I still do, and but it was a lot of work. I mean, we were very careful. I mean, there was a few songs we recorded several times to get it right. You know, we would change arrangements. Like Summer of '69, we pretty much finished it and listened to it and go, you know, there's something that's not really working here. And we re-recorded the thing. We started over. We did it all over and changed the arrangement. We actually went back with Jim Valance and worked on the arrangement in demo form and came back and redid it, and I think we got it right the second time. And so there was a bit of pressure when we wanted to make sure it was right. We weren't going to let anything get by. And we did, you know, we ended up redoing quite a few, not full tracks, but no, actually there was One Night Love Affair we redid, I think, as well. You know, so a few things, but a lot of overdubs we went back, no, that's not good enough. Let's go back and get that better. So yeah, there was some pressure.
And of course, you have Jim playing drums on the demos and stuff.
On the demos, yeah. He's a good drummer.
Well, yeah, he was in Prism, so you know, but he chose a life of writing instead, probably wisely so. Touring musician is hard. So when a band comes to you, or when Bryan comes to you in a production state, what is sort of your method for producing a band? Is it we do drums first, we do guitar first, four on the floor, everybody? What's sort of your method for getting the best performance and the best album, or does it change from band to band?
Yeah, it does change, but I prefer to have the whole band in the studio together, and the singer in the vocal booth, and everybody playing together and hearing what the other band members are doing, so they tend to react. You know, I'm a big fan of live music. I think that's why I end up doing so many live albums and live concert videos, and so I gravitate towards that. And you know, sitting there watching a guy with a mouse and a computer for days and days programming things, it's just kind of boring to me. And you know, if that's I probably wouldn't. I mean, I don't think I've ever been involved in a production like that. It's always anything that I ever produced. It was live musicians playing and together. You know, they can hear each other, and so that is my preference. I'm not saying that records have to be made like that, because obviously there's, you know, thousands of hit records that are made piece by piece and either programmed or overdub by overdub. It's just a matter of preference. I just like people reacting to each other. You know, it's just my own thing.
Your own thing. So okay, let me just ask you once again then about the new technology, because I've been involved in albums myself, and you know, we did an album not too long ago, 2013, 40 tracks. Nobody saw each other in the studio. Everything was done via email. Is that something that you're encountering too, where it's just people sending files back and forth and you don't see each other? Or is there an insistence when working with Bob that, okay, no, we can do that for some demos, but we still need to get you in a room and look at each other in the eyes?
Well, I don't produce that many records anymore. And maybe that could be partly why, because it was going in the other direction and it wasn't interesting me anymore to do that. So I'm mainly involved in the mix. So most of the time it's all already done, and I don't even know how it was done, and it doesn't matter to me, just as long as the arrangement's good and the performance is good and the song is good. And even then, even if it's bad, if they're paying me to mix it, I'll do the best I can to make it great. You know, I mean, like a lot of the things. Like I do a lot of stuff for Springsteen, and he's in New Jersey, and I'm in Los Angeles, and we do it online. And he'll send me a track, I'll mix it, and then they'll listen to it, and I go, oh, you know what? This could really use a different guitar part or something like that, or a different like needs a tambourine or something. And so then they'll just FTP some additional tracks. In fact, we're doing that right now today. I think it's Pardon me, we're working on a song like that.
Oh, nice.
And we'll put it in, and so it's sometimes it's done piece by piece. And it's interesting that once people hear the mix, they'll decide that, oh, well, it's not quite there yet. It needs something else, or it needs that piano part isn't quite making it. Let's redo that. Things like that. So yeah, that happens all the time, and that's just part of making records, and it's certainly accepted. It doesn't matter to me, but as long as it's good.
These days in the news, there's a lot of talk about a Van Halen reunion, and something might be happening. You did, of course, get a chance to work on their Tokyo Dome live in concert. Talk to me about that album, and I mean, was that sort of one show and good luck, or was it 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 shows, and you sort of got to pick and choose the best performances to make a mix? What was sort of the challenges of putting together a Van Halen live record in 2015?
Well, that was just one show, and like the Stones, they didn't come in and replay anything or fix anything. It's just what they do on stage live, and to the point where we actually kept this is unusual for me. We kept the sounds exactly the same because they're basically a 3-piece with a vocalist. Nothing changed through the whole album. In fact, I mixed the whole album like twice, I think, and once we got the sounds on everything, they said, okay, that's the sound. We love that. Let's just keep that for the whole entire record. And so it was a simple record to mix. I mean, really, once the hardest part was getting the initial sounds to get it so they're happy with, and they're a little unusual the way, especially the way the drums sounded was a little bit unusual for me. But it ended up, I think, sounded really good. I was quite happy with it. It was pretty straightforward, really.
Yeah, I mean, I know fans took some shots of that, but I love the album. I love the fact that a live album is a live album and not, live in Tokyo, but recorded in Los Angeles, because, Los Angeles studio. Just real quick, in terms of...
Can I just ask you what shots did people take at it? Just out of curiosity.
Oh, if you followed it online, they were, well, Dave's vocals are all over the place, and his singing was sloppy, and it's just like, but yeah, folks, but that's David Lee Roth. That's what he's been since 1977. It's always been somewhat of a scat vocal. It's always been somewhat of an improvised vocal. So, quel est le problème? Right, but that's what he does, and that's sort of
what he does live. Yeah,
and
yeah. Well, it was to be a fairly precise representation of their live show, which I think is what it was. Yeah.
Which is what it was, yeah. And I know since we're going to run out of time, just real quick, what sort of makes a good mixer? Because when you look at your pedigree of all the bands you've worked with, and we can repeat them ad nauseum, the Huey Lewises, the INXS's, the David Bowies, the Stones, Paul McCartney. These are not your D-list artists. These are the best of the best. Why do they come to you? What is it about you that makes it the guy? Why are you the go-to guy for these bands?
Oh, it's blackmail, actually. I have something on all of them.
No, but what makes a good mixer for the layman who's listening? What makes a good mixer? Why can't I just mix an album? Like, what's sort of that skill that puts you above the rest?
I wish I knew. I don't really know, but my guess is that kind of what I was saying earlier about really paying attention to who the artist is and what the producer and the artist, what they want, and that not to ever think that, oh, this is my record, and not, I try not to put my stamp on anything, like it should really reflect who the artist is, and I think they like that. I think I work with people, like I did a Toto album last year, and they kind of it sounds like Toto. That it sounds like what they've pretty much always sounded like, and I didn't try to all of a sudden break new ground for them. I guess I guess that's what it is. I mean, other than that, you'd have to ask them. I don't really know. And it's really interpreting the music the way they want to be interpreted, I think.
Yeah, and by the way, Steve Lukather, I had a nice chat with him the other day. One of the greatest guys, just absolutely. Well, let me ask you quickly then about Toto. Why do you think there's this perception that Toto is sort of just a studio band, and yet here they've been around for 40 years. Steve has played on upwards of 500 albums, some known, some as a ghost. And then you get an organization like the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame that just sort of thumbs their nose at them. Talk to me a little bit about Toto and why they're just precise in the studio. They're great.
Well, that's probably why, because a lot of people think of them as studio musicians, and they don't really think of them as a proper rock band. That maybe I don't know. I'm guessing, right? So don't quote me. This isn't why, but I'm just guessing that people think that Toto is like a sideline for them. That normally they're just studio guys, and they get together once in a while and make an album. And so I think since the critics maybe don't take them seriously in that they're devoted to being a rock band, like Van Halen. They don't play on anybody else's records. They don't do any outside stuff. A lot of rock bands don't. They're just their own thing. And Toto is totally different than that. And I can only guess that's
the reason. And then since we're running out of time, I'll just finish with this. You had a chance, of course, to work on Bon Jovi's These Days, Crush, Bounce, and stuff. What was it like working with that band and also getting a chance to mix Richie Sambora? Because I really do think he's one of these underrated guitar heroes. People love Richie. They love his voice. They love, Wanted Dead or Alive. But when you think guitar heroes, right away you go Jimi Hendrix, Eddie Van Halen. And yet I think Richie belongs in that conversation.
Yeah, let's see. Mixed a couple of Richie's records, and he's really good. I think I don't think he's quite as good of a songwriter maybe without John. I mean, maybe I shouldn't say that, but I mean his songs are good. They're just not. Of course, John always has a lot of help with his songs most of the time, with other songwriters like Desmond Child and people like that help him out. And I think on Richie's records he was more on his own, and so I guess I don't know. It's hard to say. I mean, I think he's fantastic. He's an amazing guitar player, that's for sure. There's no doubt about it. And he's a great guy to work with too. It's always fun working with him. With John, it's interesting because we go way back. He was originally a runner at Power Station in New York where I used to work. And so he was just this kid that would get us coffee and stuff.
With Tony.
Yeah, right. Exactly. Because he's Tony's cousin.
Yeah.
And then, I remember he finished recording his record. He used to record at night. And I'd come in and he'd say, Bob, could you mix a couple songs of my record? Because, we're pretty much finished. And I was just so busy in the 80s that I just said, John, geez, I'd love to help you out, but I just can't. And then 6 months later, I'm driving in my car and I hear Runaway come on the radio. I go, wow, that's a cool song. That's a great song. Actually, I wonder who that is. And then the DJ comes like, that's the new song by the new band Bon Jovi. And I went, oh my God, really? It's like, why didn't I mix that kid's record? So I thought that's pretty funny.
Yeah, and you got a chance to work with him later, but it was an interesting.
We stayed friends.
Yeah, and it was an interesting time back then because you had Al DeNova, you had Billy Joel's drummer, now Chuck Berge in there. That first album, man, it's a classic, even though it was sort of pieced together with all these different guys and different people. Great stuff,
Right. Yeah.
I could ask you more, but I know you wanted to stop at about 2025. We're almost at 30. So, Bob, absolute pleasure.
All right. pleasure's mine, really. And thanks for being interested in stuff that I have to say.
Yeah.
Surprised.
Well, yeah, and thank you for all the music over the years, because and I'll just go back to where we started with Bryan Adams here back this January when he said Mutt and Bob are the A-team. There really is an A-team. When you see an album that says Bob Clearmountain on it, you know that it's top quality, because the artist that's using you is top quality, and because what you do is top quality. Nobody ever says, "Where's the bass on the Bob?" Nobody says, "Why can't we hear the vocals?" You don't get that. It's always crisp, clean, clear, and appropriate. Perfect.
Well, thank you very much for the compliment. I appreciate that a lot.
And yeah,
do the best I can.
It's working out. Anyway, so many more albums to go, sports and all that, but we will leave it there, and maybe we'll do a part 2. And as we say in Montreal, merci beaucoup.
All right, great. Thank you. Take care.
Thank you. Cheers. Bye-bye.
You're listening to Rock Talk with Mitch Lafon. Rock Talk.